Welcome to Langer. Welcome to Safety Day for 2024. General start of the day. Never start a presentation with an apology, so I'll start with two. One is I've had a really good cold this week, so if I'm a bit raspy and a bit coughy at times, apologies for that. Also, the title originally that we had as a working title for this one was Please Don't Kill Me. Hopefully that's not misleading because I haven't written that one yet. It's a thing in there that's probably going to arrive later this year, but Kaylee was pushing me for a title a while ago and has published it. So really, most of what I'm doing this morning is a safety review of what we did last year, looking at where things didn't work perfectly or what did work and how we can improve and how we can prevent those sort of things. Beyond that, we then have Josh. Josh is going to do a little presentation first, and then he's going to do the suspended harness and the practical side down in Hangar 2. So some handle pulling, which is, in my view, one of the most important parts of what we do. If we look at statistics over the years, unfortunately, there's definitely an over-representation of qualified jumpers who have incidents where they simply do not pull the handles in what is called a timely and controlled fashion. So they don't make the decisions correct, and so pull handles incorrectly, or they just simply don't make a decision and they pull the handles too late or not at all. And that group is still there, and it's been there for decades. Keep the door open. It gets warm. Sit down. So really, why do we do Safety Day? Safety Day is an opportunity for qualified jumpers to review their own personal status, where they are with their jumping, where they are with their emergency procedures. Do things need to change? It's your opportunity to spend time with instructors who hopefully are up to speed with current thinking and knowledge and what's going on in the world of skydiving. With students, they get generally quite a good set of supervision. It's very, very clear what we need to be doing on a daily basis with students, refreshing their emergency procedures, training them for each individual jump. As soon as you get to A license, broadly that disappears. And we certainly see people that could potentially be A, B, C, or D license, very experienced, but they haven't actually reviewed any procedures that they carry out for maybe months, years, or even far longer. And that puts them in a precarious situation. The reality is that 20 or 30 years ago, we were breaking off from a formation at 3,500 feet. We were deploying at 2,500 feet. We were open by 2,000 feet. Fern's pulling a face at that because these days we just don't do that. The parachute systems that we use aren't really compatible with the ideas that we're going to be opening at those heights. We're not jumping out of a Cessna 206 every day with 4 people. Jumping out of an airplane with 17 people. The sky is far more crowded, so applying more space gives us more freedom to fly our parachutes in a safe way. So the world changes, and therefore reviewing your drills is a key part of what we do. I'd suggest you guys sit up there because the screen is here. You're not going to see a great deal by hunkering down in the corner. Any questions during this? There's a session at the end, so it's going to be easier if you want to ask questions. Just ask me at the end. So, safety review for last year. That's the first part that I'm going to start with this morning. For us, we had another busy year. Skydive Langer was very happy with the way things went last year. The previous year was the first time any centre in the UK completed more than 50,000 people in an aeroplane, what we think of as a slot inside an aeroplane. The British Parachuting Association, or British Skydiving, measure a tandem as being 1 jump. We measure it as 2 slots. So we exceeded 50,000 slots, but not technically 50,000 jumps, 48,000 jumps. Last year, however, we exceeded that. Last year, we did 55,000 slots. And with the tandems, that meant that we did something like 51,000 descents from the air using a parachute. That's a British record by some distance and something that we're very pleased with. 48,000 of those were with you guys. So the vast majority of what we do here at Skydive Langer is chuck qualified people out of a door of an aeroplane. And that's, again, something that we've always worked hard to be part of. We don't ever want to be just a tandem skydive centre. We're here so that we can evolve and be part of the skydiving community. So that really makes it fairly obvious what we do. Most of what we're doing here is licensed jumping. There is a little bit of tandem, a little bit of our training programs, but essentially the broad amount of what we generally do is have you guys hopefully looking after yourself as much as anything else. So there's another reason why Safety Day is important, because whilst we deal with these small fragments, all of that pie chart really talks about the people that you guys that really hopefully are looking after yourself a little bit. Last year, British Skydiving tell us there were about just under 246,000, or just over 246,000 jumps. That's actually down on the previous year by about 10,000. Most parachute centres, PTOs, parachute training organisations, suggested they saw a drop in jump numbers last year. Certainly, qualified jumpers seem to do about 10,000 less than they did the previous year. But generally, we did more. We don't really know why. There's also a little bit of static line activity. Static line still remains very common at a couple of military drop zones. It's still their primary adventure training route. And of course, free fall, that's AFF, consoles, and those sort of things are going on within the UK. Those figures aren't really changing a great deal. The static line commercially is tending to reduce. AFF is relatively flat at the moment. It picked up after COVID, but then after that has been sort of relatively flat from its jump numbers. So as an overall, last year we accounted for about 28% of qualified jumping in the UK and about 21% of the AFF jump program. So we're training students to become qualified skydivers, and we're doing a lot of the qualified skydive jumping in the UK. What's all that mean? It means we have to deal with you lot and incidents as a result of that. And that's really where the core of this session is going to be looking at, is what's going on and what we need to improve on, what you need to improve on, really. Last year we had 50 incidents where a reserve parachute was required, which is a slight drop from 56 the previous year. So we saw a slight improvement. There was one category system student. This was a 5-second delay. I don't think it was their first free falling, it was their second. They became unstable during the pull process, where the stability led to them deciding to use their reserve and have a total malfunction. Whether the total led to them overreaching and rolling over isn't fully clear on the video either, but they are in an unstable position and they elect to use the reserve because they are not comfortable using the main parachute at that point. We had 2 AFF students. One, again, a total malfunction. We'll cycle round a little bit to that. And then also another student had a misshapen canopy on deployment. So they elected to cut it away. We had no tandem incidents or reserve rides using Skydive Langer's equipment or parachute instructors. There's a little asterisk next to that. You'll notice those figures there don't quite add up to 50. There were 2 tandem reserve rides here during British skydiving training courses, but I'm not counting those as ours. That was people. Maddie was on the front of one, weren't you? Yeah. But we don't count those because I'm not taking any ownership of that. What's interesting there is what happened the previous year. And the previous year we started to be more exacting with the maintenance. We changed a lot of the parachutes. We've invested about £250,000 over the last 5 years in our parachute equipment that we provide students and that we provide for our tandem program. And I think we're seeing the results of that. Good packing, good equipment makes a huge influential difference on incident rates. And then we have 45 qualified jumpers, that is people that are A licensed and above. And you'll notice that the previous year there was 40. So we had an increase last year in incidents involving qualified skydivers, and that's the sort of concerning area, if you like. For our use of reserve, qualified jumpers accounted for 94%. So Although you deal with 80%, 87% of our jumping, you're actually creating 94% of our emergent or our incidents where reserves are required. So who are our problem children? You lot. Yeah. The smiling assassins, all right? Qualified jumpers are by far the area that if we can improve on, if we can reduce incidents, then that's the first sort of link in the chain that helps generate a more safe environment. All right? Any little incident that occurs can lead to another incident, or can lead to an incident becoming bigger and worse and more problematic. And there are examples of that throughout last year and even this year already. The first incident we dealt with, or one of the first we dealt with last year, was a wingsuiter that ended up with a problem with their main. They ended up with a reserve ride. They ended up with twists on the reserve. They actually ended up striking the ground with a reserve still in twists in a not fully controlled condition. That led to injury. That led to broken sternum, bruised lung. And then subsequently, the person was actually surprisingly fit and healthy after that. But these chain of events start with something little at the beginning. The choice of equipment, the choice of parachute, the choice of wingsuit, the choice of the type of jump that they're doing. And you can very easily lead to a chain of events that we have to be cautious of. The role here of instructors is part of that safety process, but actually the sum of all of our safety comes from you as individuals, adding a little bit to what you do individually to the whole safety process. So incidents lead to injuries or worse. Essentially, that should make common sense. We should always be aiming for a 0 incident rate. Qualified jumpers have more incidents than anybody else at Langer. They account for most of what we do in terms of incidents. And more worryingly, perhaps, 2023, that should say. In 2023, it was the only group where we saw an increase in incident numbers. So that's the area that we really want to predominantly look at.
Qualified jumpers, do you see any difference in the incident rate between different elements of the sport?
No, there's a few areas that come on the next screen. All right. So what do we do about that? Primarily, the big ones, the main problems are we're still getting lots of equipment deployment issues. Some of this, with a parachute these days, with a modern 0 porosity canopy loaded at anything above 1, could be regarded or should be regarded as a high performance situation. Increasingly these days, once you get to A, B license, even with the new charts that came out a few years ago, it's still possible to be loading your canopy at 1.1 pound per square foot in a relatively short period of time. And we still have a lot of people that really regard the charts as almost like a goal. Oh, I need to be jumping a 132 when I get to 400 jumps, and then I can jump. And the big thing about the charts was the realization in 2018 that people that were getting injured on the 120s actually were downsizing to the 170 too early, and to the 150 too early, and to the 135 too early. So when they jumped the 120, they weren't prepared for things when things were getting away from them or going wrong, because they'd not really met that previously. The interesting statistics from that came out where people were meeting a wing loading of 1.5 in about 700 and something jumps, whereas 2 decades earlier it was about 1,600 jumps. And over that time period, the people in the 90s were jumping on average about 4 canopies in that time. So in the 90s, people did 400 jumps, change canopy, did 400 jumps, change canopy, that sort of routine. And in the last 10 years, we see people typically doing between 90 and 100 jumps on a canopy, and then it's a new one, and that process continues. So by the time they get to that 700, 800, 900 jump range, they were already in a position that they'd lost some of the protection from from a lack of experience. The big danger zone when I started jumping was commonly said to be around the 200 to 500 jump range. You were getting confidence, you were doing more things, both with your parachute and with the jumps that you were doing. We probably, in many cases, weren't wearing AADs. I didn't have an AAD for my first 400 jumps or so. They were all very new back then. Nowadays, it's very much later on. We're jumping more. We're doing a lot more jumps in a shorter period of time. And we see it's around 800 to 1200 jumps is the real danger zone for people. That's the point at which they're starting to jump 150, 135, maybe even 120s, depending on their weight and where they are in the charts. And they're starting to get confident or maybe even overconfident. If I look back in the last 10 years, 15 years, all of the serious broken backs, of which I can think immediately of about 5 or 6, they're all on about that sort of wing loading and around that sort of stage in their jumping. So we've seen a shift in where people get hurt in their jumping career, but we're still seeing the same nature of injuries. Spinny twists, break lock tends to be a wing loading thing, tends to be a packing thing. You know, it's very easy to get a little complacent with our packing and our equipment. We've already had someone this year have 2 malfunctions, and a lot of that, you know, the kit needs to go to the rigger and have a new line set, which they were told before their malfunctions, and now they understand that, yeah, it does need servicing. Okay, so a lot of these are super easy to prevent. It's all down to your packing and your equipment. And then last year, and this isn't just a centre-based thing, it's more UK-wide, there were a lot of total malfunctions. Okay, we had our category system student on their back and deciding to use their reserve. That does happen occasionally, and it's sometimes a psychological or a stability thing as much as anything else. But we've also had an increasing number of people using both our own kit and their own have total malfunctions. The first malfunction this year was on lift 1 on the 1st of January. Nobody had landed at Skydive Langer on the 1st of January before we had a reserve flying around. And that individual had a total malfunction. And his first comment afterwards was, it's not the kit I normally jump. I went to the kit store, couldn't see the one I normally jump, so I just picked this one up, thought it'd be fine. And then he discovered that the handle's subtly in a different place. And as a result of that, struggled to find the main handle for deployment, spent a little bit too long trying to do it, and ended up with a reserve ride that was probably lower than it should have been. He definitely breached the 2,000 feet you should be under a parachute rule, just because, you know, he thought, well, it's normally there. I don't understand what's going on. And then we had an issue from there. So we had a lot of total malfunctions. The chat within the safety and training committee at British Skydiving on this was very much that we need to be encouraging people not to change kit, to understand the limitations of when they change kit, whether they're buying new kit, whether they're doing something different with the parachute system that they're using. Maybe they're adding stuff to their kit. This could be auxiliary equipment like helmets with cameras, or it could be something else like wingsuits. Whatever you're doing, if you're changing kit, practice touches on the ground, practice touches in the air, simplification of the jump that you're doing. Don't go and do that 6-way. Just do a solo for a jump and make sure that you're comfortable and fully familiar. Karen's nodding away in the background because I'm going to use Karen as an example later on. And we'll talk about Karen's story in a little bit. So be fully familiar with your equipment because, you know, it's a key part of what we use to save our lives. And then we had lots of wingsuit malfunctions again, and this is a growing trend around the world. Australia have introduced some new rules. France have just introduced last year quite a considerable set of rules. Ryan Garner is looking and has started to produce some rules which we'll probably be implementing at the end of this year. Essentially, wingsuits are larger and more complicated these days than we've ever seen before. People are tending to use a beginner suit. They get their WS1 or 2. They've done 10 or 15 jumps, and then they're on to the intermediate suit. It's an expensive piece of equipment. They want to upsize their suit without having to own or buy an intermediate suit too early. And people are on the bigger suits too early, essentially. And we're seeing it's just the same as canopy downsizing. It's wingsuit upsizing. So France have put into new rules. They've categorized suits as being level 1, level 2. I believe there's a third level for some extreme different types of suits. And then you must do a minimum number of jumps on a level 1 suit before you can progress to a level 2. And they're immediately seeing improved safety results. Similar sort of thing in Australia. They've introduced rules about what you can and can't jump as you're as you're learning. And they've introduced a training course for the acrobatic type wingsuit stuff as well. I'm just obtaining a manual from the Australians at the moment. We're just waiting for that to arrive so we can see if there's any nice bits out of that. And then certainly here, we're going to introduce some kind of governance, some kind of basic risk assessment. At the moment says wingsuits are causing more problems than they should be. And so we've reached that point where we're going to need to implement some kind of protective set of rules to help people with their progression. So that is up and coming. We know that this is the second year where wingsuits have contributed to the amount of incidents we've had. Final area not on here this year, but seems to pop up, is canopy formation. Last year we had the biggest European canopy formation event for many years. We had a lot of quite adventurous formations with some very high quality American world champions. Sometimes I think we exceeded the limit of skill of some people involved, or perhaps they just got a little brave. But we did have again a week of CF cutaway, CF cutaway, CF cutaway. So, but that's quite easy to regulate. And we looked at the event last year, and when we rerun that event, we'll have a few more safety precautions in place. So that's what really, they're the big areas that we need to focus on. Prevention. Most of what we do is packing. You know, if we can pack well, we can remove or eliminate a lot of the incidents. And our tandem program is really testament to that last year. With no cutaways, that's a real good testament to the kit and to the packing team and the maintenance team that sit behind that. Tandem is far more regulated than the equipment you use. Every jump, there's a specific record. There are big blue books that record all the aspects of what that kit is doing, the drogue, the inner line in the drogue, all the other components. And so it's always very well understood what that kit is doing, what it's done, what needs to happen. And if we can encourage more of that with experienced jumpers, we get rid of the guy this year that's already had 2 malfunctions, knowing that he really needed to change the line set. Packing.
Sorry, just that on that question, is that in the sense that you're recording when the line set was changed, you're recording lots of individual components as to when they were changed?
Yeah, the tandem rig and the student rigs, they have a full list of when the line sets were changed. And we'd encourage you to keep those records, hopefully for your own set of kit. It's an aeronautical device. Your logbook is your record of the usage of your kit. And it should therefore allow you to be able to record or note. And if you're using electronic logbooks, just adding in something to the effect of line change or something helps you with your records. It's surprising how many second-hand kit you see for sale where you'll ask someone, oh, how many jumps has it done? I don't know. How many jumps on the line set? No idea. Yeah, so we can definitely be better at looking after our own equipment so we have the answers ready, should we need them. More packing, but also don't jump a bigger wingsuit until you're ready. And then understanding and being familiar with your equipment. So that one comes in. Obviously, don't have a total malfunction. Yeah. But also, other parts of our equipment, the helmets that we wear, the deployment device that we have, the changes that go on when we change from a free fly friendly kit or change to a new set of kit that's more tucked and secure, and what that all implies and means it's going to be harder to deploy, doesn't it, Karen? Okay, other incidents. In addition to our reserve usage, we had 11 other incident reports. One student flew into the windsock. I don't know why, but they do. One tandem fainted prior to landing. That's a relatively classic hot sunny day. This will be the 12 or the 1 o'clock tandem. So they didn't have breakfast. They were nervous. They didn't consume any fluids. They got in the plane at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, still very warm, already dehydrated, already have a low blood sugar. They do a skydive, which is traumatic and emotional. And then they've got to listen to Jan talking to them under canopy. So I don't know whether it was Jan, but and so they fell asleep prior to landing. They were fine. And then the 9 others were qualified jumpers. Items like, there were a couple of off landings, but also things like lost shoes, lost helmets. Stop having total malfunctions, please, and stop losing stuff. Is the essence. I mean, we can just eliminate so many incidents by just doing 2 things there, and these incidents lead to other problems. The CAA, the controlling body for aviation in the UK, the Civil Aviation Authority, give most of the mandate to run parachuting to British skydiving. They're the perceived experts. But the one thing the CAA are also very involved in is the protection of the public in relation to aviation. They don't want you doing an aerial display over the top of a crowd, because if your engine stops, you can harm the crowd. And we saw that with Shoreham as an example, or problems. They really do not like us dropping things out of the sky. A helmet falling at a relatively high speed could cause a very significant problem or injury to a spectator, or to simply someone walking up the road with their grandchild or their dog. So the way we protect the public is a key part of what we do. And things like dropping stuff out of the sky is definitely a very contentious and awkward problem. There are a couple of centres, at least one in the UK, where camera usage is now 500 jumps. And that purely stems from the fact that they dropped the camera helmet out of the sky and it came extremely close to, I believe it was a spectator, and causing harm. So they upped that limit. And we've certainly seen already, only a week or so ago, we saw a camera helmet removed on exit, fell to the ground. It fell within the airfield, fortunately. It didn't create any harm. But there's an example where something didn't go right with that person's equipment. And we shouldn't be losing shoes, and we shouldn't be losing helmets. So as with previous years, qualified jumpers are responsible for the most incidents. So that's you guys, and that's where we need your assistance to prevent that sort of thing happening. Right? I can't check in the airplane that your chin strap's done up tight enough, or that your main container is closed satisfactorily, so you're not going to have a problem. Right? All incidents are preventable, and that's each an individual role. It requires you as individuals to take steps. As instructors, we can ensure that the flight line checking process is being carried out generally, but we won't be checking everybody individually as instructors. We rely on you to cooperate with each other. And fundamentally, you as the user and as the jumper are the most significant step in that safety. And that's partly what these theory sides of safety day are about, is just to generate a mental process in your mind, or just to remind you, you need to just go and double check that. There we go, that's stage 1. Any questions?
How do our numbers compare with others?
Incident-wise, so last year, with 50 incidents in 50,000 jumps, we're 1 incident every 1,068 jumps. Universally in the UK last year, I believe it was about 1 in 780. So we have less incidents here than other PTOs, which, again, considering we allow a lot more of the extreme, we are jumping very big wingsuits. We are pushing the boundaries with our CF events, for example. I think that's a reasonable statistic. I didn't necessarily include it because I don't want people going, oh, well, but we're safer, so don't have to try too hard. But we generally, actually, this year's not too bad. Previous years, we have been worse than the national statistic for the qualified jumpers. Injury rate, we've always done very well. Our statistics on injuries are very good. Last year, we had quite a few broken ankles, 2 within the staff, for example. We had someone fall down a manhole and dislocate their toe on the ground. That was something else. But generally, I think from just a scale point of view, it means that we don't tend to have quite so many incidents. Student-wise, we generally don't have too many. Some of that, I think, is a really good testament to the staff and the experience of the the staff and instructors that we have here. Some of it's testament to you guys. We are a centre with a lot of experience. Even just looking around here, you can see people with a lot of jumps. But we've got to not be complacent, because most of those 50 incidents, or the 45 that involve the qualified jumpers, are very, very easy to, you'll see me rolling my eyes when I'm watching a reserve parachute flying around, and quite often it's like, okay, that was just so easy, and if we remove 6 or 8 total malfunctions, we remove a huge amount of incidents. So we are slightly better last year. Previous years we've been slightly worse. We can be better is really the essence.
With the move here to look at bringing some rules, is that something you think British skydiving is looking at now, or will be?
So British skydiving set the minimum standard that is expected. They have their rule book, the operations manual, and then it's for parachute training organisations, PTOs such as Langer, to decide whether they deem those to be sufficient or whether we want to add further rules. I'm generally a big supporter of the idea that at a PTO level, we can manage risk better. The person that's seeing what's going on out here is me. And I see, in the last, I've been chief instructor for 15 years in a couple of months' time. And I don't know how many jumps that is, but I've overseen an awful lot. So all credit to a couple of the new safety officers within British Skydiving. Ryan Mansey's here very regularly now. So there's a lot more visibility of them on drop zones and participating in parachuting. But I think from a legislation point of view, if it gets as far as British Skydiving having to introduce legislation, there's a more systemic problem that hasn't been dealt with at a PTO level. I personally am a supporter of the idea that I think we could almost have a simplified operations manual and have the centres organising things. But that's, it's easy for me to say with a large staff and a large amount of expertise. There are other centres that are smaller, with more limited staffing, and may want to benefit from the collective experience of British skydiving. If the problem continues, then something will have to change. And we know that we're already seeing improvements in particularly France, as an example. Ryan was out in France earlier this year, and he was surprised how much stuff he had to go through at the drop zone when he turned up with his big wingsuit and had to demonstrate, I have all of these jumps, look where I've been. And then he was cleared to do what he wanted to do with that suit. But he came back from that and actually went, you know what, that was quite good, because they are thinking about why they're having problems. And it's reflected universally. We are seeing internationally more problems. So I think the PTOs will take a lead on that. But if not, then maybe British Skydiving will have to become more involved. Okay. General safety, the things that we can do to help ourselves also influence the safety of others. Okay, can't get away without a little death story. This is a PAC 750. It's a photo of one. There was one sat in the hangar for the last 3 months. Sadly, this is the same aeroplane. This is a photo from a few weeks ago. Okay, and that's the same aeroplane. The report's not fully concluded, but the essence of this is, and the pilot didn't survive this, was that on exit or during the climb out, there was a premature deployment from one of the skydivers. That caused problems with the tail of the aeroplane and put the aeroplane into a configuration that was no longer flyable or controllable. So what we do doesn't just affect our own safety, it can have a massive influence. And the reason I put this up was something Gareth said to me the other week. Gareth flew Foxy for a day, I think 2 weeks last Saturday. He only flew about 11, 12 lifts. But interestingly, he came down and he said, right, these people are not wearing seatbelts. Every time we've taken off, that individual didn't put a seatbelt on. They were having difficulty threading it around something because of their wingsuit, I think. He had 3 different occasions where people either climbed out of the aeroplane with their main flap already open, or he had to ask people as they were moving to the door to stop and to reset their main flap. And that was to do with them grating their kit on the side of the airplane as they were turning around and moving around. Too much motion without a protective, just a little hand around the back. Yeah, my main flap's still closed. Or I think I've just caught something, have a look for me. These sort of little bits can have a massive influence on our safety. And Gareth just sort of came and reported to me at the end of the day, there's a few little bits missing here. Something, is it complacency? Is it just, they've forgotten I should climb out of an airplane and have everything super secure? Because it's something really silly like that, especially when you catch, he saw one, I think, was the main flap was actually opened as they caught it round the door as they were reversing and turning around in the door. And that's the worst scenario for us. All of these things, and there's a classic example. It's so easy to prevent through the procedures that we follow. Make sure your kit is good, but also the way you treat it as you climb out of the airplane is respectful, and then it's going to look after you. Okay. So the consequences of what we do can be serious, and they can have an immense effect on other people. This is the second part of what I'm going to do, and I'm going to run straight into it unless people are, if people want to take a little 2 minutes, by all means do, but this isn't a long one. This is just something that came about more recently. I was actually going to do a little bit more on this. However, there was a nice presentation webinar that Laura's been running over the winter, which is available on our website, that covers a lot of some of the ideas that we're going to come up with. At the start of this year, Langer's decided to increase the AAD firing height for all of its centre equipment, with the exception of tandem, because it functions in a different sort of regime. And we've raised the deployment heights on all of our visual units by 150 feet. Cypress, we've raised by 200 feet. There was an incident at another PTO a couple of years ago, and one of the products of that investigation was just a reminder to centres, do we need to review or consider our AAD firing height? It wasn't necessarily influential in that incident, but it did just highlight the importance of having a sensible AAD height. I said earlier on, how many of us are deploying at 2.5 these days? How many are open at 2,000 feet? No one puts their hand up. We're all open. I can't remember the last time I wasn't open under a fully formed canopy at 3,000 feet. And whilst the rules say that once you get to sea license, that can be 2.5, really that's a day when the cloud base is 3,000 feet and we're doing a hop and pop. If I get out of an airplane above 6,000 feet, I'm going to be open by 3,000 feet. And I see no reason these days to do anything else. We're not jumping out of a 206 pleading to get 10,100 feet, because it's exciting to go above 10. We're jumping routinely at 14,500 feet. And with the engines and the upgrades that we've done to the airplane, it isn't even 13.5 anymore, it's 14.5. So we've given ourselves, that freedom at the bottom end to be opening higher. And that makes sense. We're flying fast parachutes that go wrong and can be more exciting when they go wrong and lose height more quickly when they go wrong. But also we're flying faster parachutes with other people, lots of other people in the sky. And so applying more space gives us more freedom, it gives us more flexibility, it gives us a little bit more safety. At the same time, therefore, by lifting up our deployment heights, we've given ourselves more room at the bottom end to consider what our AAD fires at. Historically, in the early 90s, AADs were really that last minute, open the reserve just prior to hitting the ground. A 6-second reserve ride, something of that order, could be expected if you're lucky. What's changed, though, is that we've now started to jump much smaller and tighter equipment. We're seeing much more compact parachute systems. Free fly friendly is another way of saying this parachute won't accidentally deploy. It's more contained. The handles are harder to be dislodged. The handles are harder to be pulled and activated, therefore, as well. So all of this means that it can take longer, actually, now for a reserve parachute to deploy in certain situations than perhaps it would have done in the mid-90s, where the parachutes were just a little bit easier to remove. With the AADs set as they are, it doesn't take much of a pilot chute hesitation or a moment where it's trying to roll you back over to release the free bag, especially if the main is still in there and everything's very compactly still closed. You don't get much room or much margin for error for a little pilot chute hesitation. So lifting up the height adds a little bit more safety to the process, and that was our sort of thinking behind it all. I hope Karen doesn't mind, because I'm going to use her as a good training example. So we had an AAD fire 3 weeks ago. A combination of things got us to that point. New equipment that's more free fly friendly, that's more complex, or certainly more difficult physically to deploy. But then we also had some decisions about how many times we were going to try and how long we were going to go for before AAD 5. But my overriding comment, and I've seen several AADs over the years, but I've not seen one for a little while. First thing I said to Gareth was, you forget how low people are when they're AAD fires. You know, the data from that one showed that it refers to an end point of 425 feet. Well, that's the point at which she stopped going at 78 mile an hour. Actually, to be below 20 mile an hour, what we'd think of as a survivable sort of speed, we're down at 320 feet. And then it was a pretty short reserve ride. So you add 150 feet to that, and suddenly you're amplifying the amount of time under canopy to find a safe space. So these days we're pulling higher, and we've got more room to lift up the AAD height without the risk of having two out or other things. And so that's really our primary thinking behind all that. They were originally designed as a last resort, and it's very different these days. Sadly, I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, there's probably more incidents of an AAD fire and that individual still not surviving, striking the ground at line stretch under their reserve, than there were 30 years ago when these AADs were first introduced. And that's the nature of the equipment that we're wearing. If you talk to a lot of the modern AAD companies, and we'll talk about Vigil in particular in a minute, they would now say that if they were to remanufacture this equipment, they'd probably choose a higher height. So adding a small amount of height could provide an extra layer of safety. It gives you room or time for any kind of brief reserve deployment. What to look for on our equipment. So this is a Vigil. Cypress is slightly different, and if you want advice on Cypress, the reason I've chosen Vigil is A, I have one, but B, there are 52 sets of equipment downstairs in the kit store. There's only 2 Cypresses. All the rest are Vigils. So we're pretty much a Vigil center. The P indicates the mode. It could be S for student. The mode tends to relate to the parachute system rather than the user. When our students use our student equipment and then they get their A license and continue to use that same set of equipment, the AAD remains in student mode because it's a student parachute system. We don't change that. The plus obviously represents that the altitude is increased. The figure gives you the height or the change. And then feet indicates that the unit is in feet. It is possible to have these in a metric or in a meters. So how much height? Some of the centers are going for 300 feet. Others are not. It depends whether it's a student or pro mode. What height who's got a Vigil? What height does your Vigil fire at if it's in pro mode? 840, yeah. So if you're adding 150 feet to that, you're adding a reasonable amount of difference. The student AAD fires at just over 1,000 feet, so we felt that 150 feet was a sort of sensible addition at this stage. So that's an option. We're not suggesting to you guys or saying to you guys you should change your AD, but you should think about what you do as a jumper. The UK, I think, is starting to sort of not lead the way, but be one of those countries where this is happening. And Pro Bravo has probably been ahead of us for a number of years. They've suggested a couple of 100 feet on their Cypresses. Some other places perhaps are still a little bit behind. More on an education point of view, why is this happening? And that led me on to this. But this is the seminar that was given this week by Vigil as part of Laura's webinars, and it's on our website. And he gives some quite interesting points about the use of an AAD. And he just suggests, that if they were to remanufacture it, they would consider a higher AAD firing height. The reason that it's not happening is that you don't really want to have different units in the field that are all doing different things. Well, my pro mode vigil does this, and it gives the user the opportunity to make their decisions as to how we do that. But it also adds the interesting point, and I think this is something that is missed out by a few people. He reminds people that the AAD's only function is to cut the closing loop. A lot of people will commonly think of an AAD as something that opens their reserve. It doesn't do that. It's just there to cut the closing loop at a certain point. That may or may not result in a full reserve deployment. We hope it will, but again, adding a little bit of height might just help us with the safety on that aspect. Your timing is perfect because I'm just about to finish. Okay, so that's our sort of motivation. Our students are typically opening at 5,000 feet. The static line program used to be 3,500 feet. It's now 4,000 feet. We've generally lifted everything up that we do, and that's given us the room to just move the AADs up a little bit. The AAD fire we had this year is the first one I remember in a few years. But when they do happen, adding a little bit of margin might just give you a bit of help. So give it some thought, but it's key that you understand your own equipment and what the logic and the process is behind it. Any questions?
Why is the student AAD set so much higher? Because obviously I jump on phone mode, but I don't consider myself very experienced yet. So
Okay.
I would set
So
that.
students, even historically, must have been open by 3,000 feet. Your average AFF student, we used to get them to wave off at 5.5. We now get them to wave off at 6. Half the time they're waving off at 7 anyway. And you're like, they've gone. Okay. They think 6,000 feet for their hot and pop is horrendously close to the ground. So having that slightly higher pull height gives them a little bit more safety and a little bit more time. Qualified jumpers, in theory, you could still be in free fall till 2,580 feet. Your canopy as a C licensed person needs to be open. So the AAD was designed not to give lots of people 2 canopies. What we don't want is anybody that fumbles the pull ending up in that firing zone and ending up having 2 canopies deployed. They didn't want to solve one problem, the total malfunction hitting the ground problem, by adding another problem in. So they pushed the deployment height to pretty much as low as they dare, but now we can add a little bit to it because everything's been lifted as a result of that. It's a last resort type thing.